previous lesson, we looked at the economy and economic growth. The impact of economic growth on our environment has led some scientists and economists to propose that we need to change from a growing economy to a steady state economy. They are looking at what has happened to natural resources, waste and natural ecosystems as economic growth has occurred during recent decades. So just what has happened? A recent study has found that the growing economy is associated with increases in a number of different components of our environment. In the last few centuries, and more particularly since 1950, there has been an increase in the number of people in the world. With that, there has been an increase in economic growth, the goods and services in the world, although it is important to note that most of the benefit of growth has gone to people living in richer countries. Over the last 100 years, the number of people living in cities has accelerated. Now, over 50% of the entire global population live in a city. A rapid increase in energy use has also occurred. Fertilizer use has increased substantially. More large dams have been built. Fresh water use has also increased. Paper manufacturing has accelerated, as have the number of motor vehicles on the road. More people are travelling to other countries, mainly by aeroplane. The result of this growth has been an increase in carbon dioxide levels, now regarded as at crisis level. There is more nitrous oxide coming from farms and other sources. Methane, another greenhouse gas contributing to climate change, has also increased. An increase in CFC gases that came from refrigerators and spray cans has led to a breakdown of the ozone layer in the upper atmosphere. This layer of gas stops cancer-causing UV radiation from the sun reaching Earth. The average temperatures over land and sea have increased, contributing to a growing number of droughts and bushfires in different parts of the world, including Australia. The growing level of carbon dioxide has made the oceans more acidic. The global fish catch has risen since figures were first kept in 1950. Land put to use for humans instead of natural ecosystems continues to increase. More forest areas have been converted into farms. Along with a greater number of farms has come more eutrophication in coastal waters. The number of prawn farms has grown substantially. These graphs are now called the Great Acceleration graphs. The economies of countries around the world continue to grow. There are more goods and services, more people, more waste, and more natural resources being used. Back in the late 1960s and 70s, a number of researchers investigated what would happen if economic growth continued in this way. They were asked by a group called the Club of Rome to find whether there was a limit to this growth. They used a computer to try to predict what might happen. The group concluded that natural resources required for economic growth would become less and less available. There was a prediction that the number of babies being born would decrease, but then towards the middle of this century begin increasing again. With better health services, the death rate was predicted to decrease, but again, towards the middle of this century, increase once more. Food production would continue to increase, along with the production of goods and services. However, with the increase in pollution and the decrease in resources, the level of goods and services such as health and education would decrease, resulting in increase in the death rate and birth rate towards the middle of this century. In 2008, research was done to see if the Club of Rome's computer-generated predictions were coming true after a period of 35 years. The findings were that the level of pollution, as measured by the level of greenhouse gases, had increased close to the computer prediction. Services, as indicated by the use of electricity per person, had increased at a slightly faster rate than expected. The production of goods had continued to increase close to what was expected. The amount of food eaten per person had increased more than expected. The number of children born decreased more than predicted, as did the death rate. The result was that the population continued to increase as anticipated. The decrease in resources has not been as expected, although it is clear that oil and gas, for example, are getting more difficult to obtain. More recently, another group of researchers from the Stockholm Resilience Centre in Sweden looked at the actual limits or boundaries that might increase the risk of generating large-scale, abrupt or irreversible environmental changes. Some boundaries they found were difficult to measure. For example, the amount of some pollutants are difficult to measure. It's difficult to know just how seriously the effect of insecticides is on the bees that are needed for pollination, for example. Other boundaries that could put the world at risk are still considered at safe levels. For example, the supply of fresh water, acidification of oceans, and the breakdown of the ozone layer. However, the conversion of natural ecosystems to farmland and the damaging effects of climate change are seen to be placing the global community at an increasing risk. The rates of extinction of animals and plants and the production of waste phosphates and nitrates are now at levels that could create large-scale, abrupt or irreversible environmental changes. The risk here is classed as high. Another international body studying the loss of different plants and animal species throughout the world points out that 1 in 4 species throughout the globe is now at risk of extinction. Yet another group of scientists are looking at what is happening to our environment in a different way. They are looking at what they call our ecological footprint. They measure the global footprint by looking at how many Earths would be needed if all the people throughout the world lived at the same lifestyle as people in rich countries. They call the date when humanity's demand for ecological resources in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year, Earth Overshoot Day. They have found that Earth Overshoot Day has been occurring earlier in almost every year since it was first introduced in 1970. So now we know what is happening, and it is prompting a growing number of people to learn from natural, healthy, steady-state ecosystems, so that humans can continue to thrive in harmony with the natural world for centuries to come.